Most history books begin World War II with a single moment. A date, September 1st, 1939. At dawn, German troops cross the Polish border. Tanks roll forward. Planes roar overhead. Europe is at war again. Simple, clean, almost cinematic. But history rarely works like that, because wars, especially wars that kill more than 60 million people, don't begin in a single morning. They begin quietly, in meetings, in banks, in contracts, in decisions that seem perfectly reasonable at the time. So here's the real question. What if World War II didn't actually start in 1939? What if the true beginning happened 20 years earlier, in a palace outside Paris?
June 1919. The world had just survived the deadliest war humanity had ever seen. Cities were destroyed. Empires had collapsed. Nearly 20 million people were dead. Inside the Palace of Versailles, the victors of World War I gathered to decide Germany's fate. France wanted security. Britain wanted balance. America wanted peace. What they created instead was something far more dangerous: the Treaty of Versailles. On paper, it was supposed to prevent another war. In reality, it quietly built the conditions for the next one. Germany was forced to accept full blame for the war, and that blame came with a price, a massive one: 132 billion gold marks. To understand how extreme that number was, imagine a bankrupt nation being handed a bill worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Germany had already lost 13% of its territory, 12% of its population, nearly half of its iron production, huge portions of its coal reserves, and its military? Crushed. The German army was reduced to 100,000 soldiers, no tanks, no air force, no submarines. It was humiliation on a national scale. But one man watching the negotiations realized something terrifying. British economist John Maynard Keynes. He resigned from the peace conference in protest. Then he wrote a warning that would become one of the most prophetic predictions of the 20th century. He wrote, "If we deliberately impoverish Germany, vengeance will not limp." History would prove him right, but not for the reason most people think.
The problem wasn't just that Germany had to pay. The problem was how the system was designed. Germany couldn't pay the reparations. Everyone knew it. Its economy was shattered. Its currency was collapsing. By 1923, the German mark had become almost worthless. Hyperinflation exploded. Prices doubled in days, then hours. At its worst moment, $1 equaled 4.2 trillion German marks. People carried money in wheelbarrows just to buy bread. Life savings vanished overnight. Middle-class families became poor in weeks. The German economy was falling apart. And then something unexpected happened. America stepped in, not with soldiers, with money. In 1924, a plan was introduced to fix the crisis. It was called the Dawes Plan. The idea seemed brilliant. American banks would loan money to Germany. Germany would use that money to pay reparations to Britain and France. Then Britain and France would use those payments to pay their war debts back to the United States. Money flowed in a perfect circle. America to Germany to Europe to America. Everyone appeared to win. Germany stabilized. Factories reopened. Unemployment fell. The 1920s became known as the Golden Twenties. Berlin exploded with culture, nightlife, art, music. For a moment, it looked like Europe had recovered. But beneath the surface, the entire system was built on borrowed money. Germany wasn't generating wealth, it was borrowing money to pay its debts, and systems like that only survive until the loans stop. October 24th, 1929. Wall Street. Panic spread through the stock market. Shares collapsed. Banks failed. The Great Depression had begun.
American banks suddenly needed their money back. Foreign loans were called in. Overnight, the financial lifeline holding Germany together vanished. Factories shut down, banks collapsed, businesses closed. Unemployment exploded. In just 3 years, it jumped from 1.4 million people to over 6 million. At the worst point, 1 out of every 3 German workers had no job. Families starved, savings disappeared. Democracy looked weak, broken, useless. And in moments like that, people start looking for someone to blame.
In 1928, a small political party in Germany had received just 2.6% of the vote. Most people considered them extremists, cranks, a joke. Their leader was a failed artist and former soldier named Adolf Hitler. But economic collapse changes everything. By 1930, his party had surged to 18% of the vote. By 1932, they became the largest political party in Germany. Why? Because Hitler offered something democracy couldn't: certainty. He blamed the Treaty of Versailles, communists, Jews, corrupt politicians, and foreign powers, and he promised simple solutions: restore German pride, rebuild the military, create jobs, destroy the system that humiliated Germany. Millions believed him, but ideology alone wasn't enough to seize power. Hitler needed something else: money. While millions of ordinary Germans supported the Nazis, some of the country's most powerful industrialists also began backing Hitler. Steel magnates, industrial tycoons, business leaders terrified of communism. Men like Fritz Thyssen poured money into the Nazi Party. They believed Hitler could control the workers, destroy socialism, restore order. They thought they could control him. They were wrong. On January 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, not through revolution, not through war, but through political deals made behind closed doors. And that's when the story becomes even more uncomfortable. Because Germany didn't rebuild alone. It had help from companies you probably recognize. In 1936, the American ambassador to Germany sent a disturbing report to President Franklin Roosevelt. He warned that over 100 American companies had major business operations inside Nazi Germany. Some of them were enormous: Ford, General Motors, IBM, Standard Oil. These companies weren't just selling products, they were deeply embedded in the German economy. Ford factories in Germany produced military trucks. General Motors controlled Opel, the largest car manufacturer in the country. Together, Ford and GM dominated 70% of the German auto market. Those vehicles later carried Nazi troops across Europe. IBM technology was used for census systems that helped identify Jewish populations. Punch card machines tracked prisoners in concentration camps. Standard Oil worked with German chemical companies to develop synthetic fuel, essential for tanks and aircraft. None of this was secret. Executives visited Germany. Some even received medals from Hitler himself. And when the war began in 1939, many of those corporate relationships didn't immediately stop. Profit had its own logic, one that often ignored politics or morality. Inside Germany, Hitler launched massive economic programs: highways, factories, military production. Unemployment vanished almost overnight. It looked like a miracle, but the miracle was mostly an illusion. The Nazi economy was powered by something called Mefo bills, essentially hidden government debt. Weapons manufacturers were paid with promissory notes instead of real money. The system allowed Germany to secretly finance massive rearmament while hiding the costs. For a while, it worked, but by the late 1930s, the debt was becoming impossible to sustain. Germany faced a brutal reality. Its economy could not survive without expansion, without resources: oil, iron, land. And that meant only one thing: war. So when German tanks crossed into Poland in 1939, the war didn't truly begin that morning. It had been building for decades,
piece by piece. A treaty designed to punish a defeated nation, a financial system built on unstable debt, a global economic collapse, political extremism born from desperation, industrial elites funding radical movements, international corporations chasing profit. Each decision made sense in isolation. Each seemed rational, even beneficial, but together they created the conditions for the deadliest conflict in human history.
World War II is often told as a story of villains and heroes, of dictators and brave soldiers. And those stories matter, but they are incomplete because the deeper story is about systems, about economics, about how financial collapse can destroy democracies, about how profit can override morality, about how thousands of ordinary decisions can slowly build the path to catastrophe. World War II didn't begin with a single invasion. It began with debt, with money, with choices made decades earlier. And that is the part of the story many textbooks leave out.
Nearly 80 years later, the world looks very different, but the forces that created that catastrophe still exist. Economic crises, corporate influence, political extremism fueled by instability. History rarely repeats itself exactly, but it often rhymes. And if we only remember the battles, but forget the financial systems that built the war, we might miss the warning signs of the next one. Because the truth about World War II isn't just about the past. It's about how the modern world actually works and how easily it can break.
If you found this hidden side of history fascinating, consider subscribing, because the most important stories in history are often the ones we were never taught to look for.